A mighty spine cleaves New Zealand's South Island, the Southern Alps, defining Westland, isolating it. Yet the same dynamics that shaped this great divide also laid bare twin enticements to help surmount it. Jade, treasure of the ages, and gold, gleaming gold. When Abel Tasman first sighted the West Coast in 1642, it was already home to a community of craftspeople, gleaning precious green stones from a few select valleys, patiently, painstakingly fashioning the sacred Pounamu. Prized by their kinsmen in war or peace, work or worship. But now to the fastness of the coast came the vanguard of a Pākehā invasion. Sealers, surveyors, pathfinders, prospectors. In 1860, the Crown purchased much of the west coast for 300 gold sovereigns, an investment soon to be repaid 1,000-fold in the self-same metal. Just 4 years later, two Maori prized a jade boulder from a stream bed near Hokitika and noticed gold flakes glistening underneath. Westland's first payable goldfield was born at Greenstone Creek, and Westland itself was born with a rush, a gold rush. During the next 3 years, the solitudes of the West would be swept aside by thousands of diggers, men rough and ready. They had to be. This was the coast.
She was tough going, all right. I'll never forget when I first landed. I had to walk nigh on 20 mile up to my knees. Nothing but mud before we even got to the field. But some of them boys who walked in over the mountains were hardly but skin and bone by the time they got here. Took them weeks to get up enough muscle to even lift a pick, let alone swing it.
The coast. The latest El Dorado in the great southern migration of the miners, the 49ers, Ballarat, Bendigo, Otago, the coast. Waimea, New Year's 1865, another strike.
You should have seen that mob of diggers, lighting fires, pitching tents, fighting, drinking, cussing and shouting all at once. One day it was all bush, the next, it was a whole street. Huts, stores, pubs, butchers, bakers, blacksmiths, even a doctor's shop. It was like a tornado who picked up a whole town and dropped it down right smack in the middle of the bush. The old Waimea was a good field too. Some of the parties early on were washing a billy full of dust a day.
The gold was there all right, but it didn't always come cheap. Many diggers in their quest paid the highest price of all, drowned, lost in the bush, dead through starvation, privation, death by misadventure. For every digger on a jackpot claim, a homeward bounder, there were dozens struggling to make wages, or worse, on a tucker claim, making just enough to stay alive. But fortunes were still to be made, new fields still to be found. The rushes continued. Canere, Ross, Red Jacks, Sardine Terrace, Donohue's, 2 pennyweights to the dish, Okarito, the Black Sanders, a rush of rushes. In 1864, Hokitika was a desolate cluster of canvas shanties. Just 2 years later, a digger in funds could take a sumptuous dinner at, say, the Café de Paris, to be followed perhaps by an evening of Shakespeare at the Prince of Wales Opera House. Provided, of course, rain beating on the corrugated iron roof didn't drown out the recitation. In just 2 explosive years, Hokitika had boomed into a major commercial centre, with upwards of 6,000 residents and many more passing through. Despite a treacherous sandbar which claimed dozens of victims, Hokitika's river port was one of the colony's busiest, shipping out the highest value of exports and shipping in most of a cargo more precious still, people. Diggers with a fund of practical know-how, women willing to live and work in a land still wild, invaluable immigrants for the coast and the colony.
We stuck together. That was the main thing. If a man bust his leg in the diggings, work would come to a stop till we got him out to the doctor. If he was out of pocket, well, there'd be a collection to see him right. Of course, there was the odd bad apple. I remember one old-timer, he'd blow the sand out of your gold before he weighed it. But he'd always keep the bottom of his beard oiled up. So when he leant over the dish to blow, some of the gold would stick to it, and he'd just wash the gold out of his beard later. Oh, did he hightail it when we found out. I've never seen a man's body so far in front of his legs.
With the miners, to wherever the gold was went an energetic retinue. Ferrymen, merchants, freighters, road makers, bridge builders, barbers, bankers and blacksmiths. Not forgetting the publicans and dance girls, lest the diggers' golden gains burn holes in their moleskin pockets. After a week, often thigh-high in icy mountain water, a digger needed the diversions of the likes of the Casino de Venice to take his mind off his rheumatics. Gold dust would be acceptable tender at the bar, so that no one need go thirsty while he queued to dance a quadrille with one of the heavily outnumbered barroom belles. As it was customary for men of generous disposition to shout the bar on a barmaid's birthday, the publicans would stimulate business by making sure that the girls had at least one birthday a month. Of course, not all of the women on the coast were barmaids and dance girls. Many women, married and unmarried, made a living as hotel keepers, storekeepers, midwives, teachers, and as domestic servants. Nothing populates a wilderness like gold, it was said, and so it was for the coast. Low in bulk and high in value, it was an ideal commodity for a region where overland travel was arduous and communications minimal. 1866 saw the peak of West Coast production. Over 500,000 ounces, 15 tons of gold, worth more than £2 million in vital funds. And still the rushes continued. Buller, Karamea, Charleston, Tucker Flat, Stafford, Dead Man's Flat, Goldsboro, Brighton Town. Only 5 weeks old and 53 hotels already. For a heyday goldfield with a young, volatile population, the crime rate was remarkably moderate, apart from the usual charges of drunkenness and reckless riding. Yet the temptations were still strong. Many hard-won pouches of dust were forcibly separated from their rightful owners. Diggers would disappear in dubious circumstances. An occasional despicable murder was certainly done. But for all that, if a masked man was encountered on a bush track, chances were it was just a fellow digger with his head in a flour bag, armoured only against the mosquitoes and sandflies.
Rain? We had one shower lasted a month, then it settled down to drizzle for another. Of course, it used to rain more in them days, before they started cutting down the bush. Usually, with the rain, you get the mist as well. Next thing, the sun would break through, and you get a day so sharp you could shave with it.
While the generous coast rainfall often made life uncomfortable, a copious water supply was the digger's best friend for winning the precious yellow. Half again heavier than lead, gold will quickly settle in a solution of water, allowing lighter gravels to be washed away, as with simple panning. The cradle and sluice box, or long tom, employed this principle on a bigger scale, using wooden slats and matting to trap the treasure as gravel washed through, just as sheepskins were once used to catch fine gold in waterways, giving rise to the legend of the Golden Fleece 3,000 years ago. In the same way, the very fine gold of the beach deposits was extracted by mercury plates. The gold amalgamated with the mercury and was separated later. The West Coast black sand deposits are one of only 3 such known deposits in the world, and the shifting sands can still yield a healthy glitter to an experienced fossicker. The giant nozzles of hydraulic sluices, or else direct ground sluicing, could wash vast amounts of gravel a day and completely alter the face of a landscape in a matter of weeks. To deliver sufficient water to the sites, intricate networks of water races and flumes stalked the countryside. One such race serving the Waimea field was over 30 kilometres long. For underground deposits, windlass or whim were used to wrest the pay dirt to the surface. As the easier alluvial deposits dwindled, the miners focused on the gold-bearing quartz reefs. In a golden age of bush engineering, fantastic arrays of stamping batteries were soon crushing the colour from the quartz wherever it could be found. Water-driven at first, then later powered by steam and electricity, working at Crushington, Quartzopolis, Reefton. By now, only well-equipped companies could profitably win this more difficult gold. The day of the independent digger was fast disappearing. Already talk was of the good old days of just a few years ago, and ghosts were starting to stalk yesterday's boomtowns.
10 long years since I landed here in a trackless land of wet and cold. Some of our lives were pretty severe, but who courts hardship looking for gold?
For many a restless digger, it was time to move on.
Here's a long farewell to the old West Coast, with a heart prepared for whatever I find. Success to the palmer, is that your toast? Mine's here's to the land I'm leaving behind.
The Kumara Rush of 1876 marked the end of an epoch, a last rich alluvial terrace discovered by 2 sly groggers digging to conceal their illicit still. Fittingly, in the same year, Parliament confirmed Westland County's political autonomy, independent yet no longer isolated, with a road through Arthur's Pass now straddling the Alps to Canterbury. The gold had done its job. Another West had been won, with a legacy of roads and rail, bridges, foundling towns and communities. Communities for whom the coast was by now well and truly home.
We had this one real wet blanket, Bobby. Kept on sneaking round the pub trying to stop us having a few late night congeniality noggins. Yeah, real nuisance he was. Anyway, one night the publican sees him sneaking in the shed out the back, waiting to catch us. So the publican snuck out too and throws the bolt in the shed door. He leaves the Bobby there stewing for a couple of hours. Then he calls the local constabulary to come round and nab the prowler he's caught red-handed. Well, you should have seen his face when they let him out, redder than a nappy rash. Kept him quiet for quite a while. Yeah, they was the good old days. Thing was, we were mates. You made a friend then, and he was a friend for life. We're all in it together, you see.
The quartz mines helped the coast remain the country's biggest gold producer until 1895. And with the appearance of the giant dredges, commenced a new era of gold extraction. Although rugged conditions brought many to an early end, at the turn of the century, over 50 dredges were working the main waterways. But these were still crucial years for the coast. As the flush of the gold pounds faded, new livelihoods had to be won. The tunnels and shafts that once tracked terraces and reefs now drove for the black seams of coal. The stands of Rimu and Kaihikatia no longer fell to the soya for fluming and long toms, but for local construction and export. Now pastoral green checkered the forest expanses as farmers cut and burnt, stocked and cropped. Now a family had time to grow. The coast of people and towns would live. Gold continues to be won in Westland by small mining companies using modern technology. Many others still try their luck too, hoping for a lucky strike and another golden payday. And once more, craftsmen patiently fashion the coveted jade of the Westland valleys. Working close to the sites where once other artisans shaped and polished. A long, long journey ago.